Once, he was the golden boy of Europe, tall, athletic, charming. King Henry VIII had it all: the crown, the women, the money, even his own church. But by the end of his life, Henry looked less like a king and more like a broken shadow of who he used to be. Let's fast forward to the year 1546. The king is now in his mid-50s. Not too old, right? Well, for Henry, it might as well have been 105. He'd ballooned to over 300 pounds. His waistline was so wide they needed to remake his armor twice. And the real cherry on top? A giant ulcer on his leg that refused to heal. The smell. Think rotten meat left out in the summer sun. Yeah. Court members had to hold their breath when entering the room. He couldn't walk without help. In fact, he couldn't even climb onto his horse without a mechanical lift, basically a medieval forklift for one very large, very grumpy king. And don't even think about crossing him. His temper was like a lit fuse. One wrong word and boom, off with your head. Friends, advisors, even old allies. No one was safe. Henry didn't care if you'd known him for 20 years. If you looked at him the wrong way, you might just disappear. Some say the pain made him cruel. Others think the power had always been there. The pain just gave him an excuse. By this time, Henry wasn't ruling with strategy anymore. He ruled by fear. His court walked on eggshells. Whispers filled the halls, but never too loud. The walls had ears, and Henry had spies. He barely trusted anyone. His council tried to give him advice, but most of the time he just stared at them like they were annoying flies buzzing in his ear. And deep down, maybe Henry knew the end was near. His days of jousting, dancing, and charming ladies were long gone. Now, his days were filled with doctors, infections, and a whole lot of yelling. Once, kings feared losing their thrones, but Henry, he feared losing control of everything. And as his body broke down, so did his mind. The mighty Lion of England was now stuck in his chambers, surrounded by shadows, and haunted by the smell of his own rotting leg. But believe it or not, the worst was still to come. You'd think being king meant peaceful nights, right? Not for Henry VIII. By the end of his life, he was haunted, not just by enemies or bad politics, but by his wives. Yep, the ghosts of his past were very much alive in his mind. Let's not forget, out of 6 wives, 2 were executed, 2 were divorced, 1 died, and only the last one survived him. Not exactly a record to brag about. People close to the king said he often mumbled names in his sleep. Sometimes it was Anne Boleyn, the queen he once loved, then beheaded. Other times it was Jane Seymour, the only wife he ever claimed to truly love. She died, giving birth to his only son, Edward. One servant swore that he once heard the king whispering, "Forgive me," into the empty air. Imagine that, the most powerful man in England, mumbling apologies into the darkness. Creepy, right? And it wasn't just in his sleep. Henry grew quiet, stared off into space. Sometimes he'd just sit and rub the ring that had belonged to Jane. He even asked painters to include her in his portraits long after she was gone. But here's the twist. Even though he was haunted by guilt, he didn't stop being dangerous. His 6th wife, Catherine Parr, was smart, like genius-level smart. She knew that one wrong step could get her killed, just like Anne. So she played the game. She praised Henry, agreed with him, smiled when he was grumpy. It was survival mode, royal edition. There's even a story that Henry almost had her arrested. Why? because she dared to argue theology, basically a fancy talk about religion. But when she found out, she rushed to him crying, said she was just trying to distract him from his pain. He believed her. Crisis avoided, barely. Even his kids didn't bring him much peace. Princess Mary and Princess Elizabeth stayed out of his way. Little Edward, the future king, was kept at a distance. Henry didn't exactly do bedtime stories and cuddles. His love came in the form of titles and rules. The palace was silent at night, heavy. No laughter, no singing, just whispers and the occasional groan of the king in pain. Some believed the ghosts of his dead wives truly visited him. Others say the guilt just lived inside him and grew louder the closer he got to death. Either way, the mighty king was now just an old man in a big, dark room, surrounded by regrets he couldn't escape. And while the ghosts whispered in his ears, his body had begun to rot from the inside. Let's talk about something truly nasty now. The king's leg. By the final years of his life, Henry VIII didn't just have health problems. He was a walking health problem. Well, not exactly walking, more like rolling, groaning, and wheezing. Right below his knee, on his left leg, was a massive ulcer, a deep, infected wound that refused to heal. It leaked, it stank, it never let him sleep in peace. Some days, it oozed so much, his bed sheets had to be changed 3 times a day. And the smell. Oh, everyone at court knew that smell. You could be 10 steps away and still know, yep, the king's awake. Doctors tried everything. Honey, vinegar, animal fat, even crushed pearls. Basically, anything they could find in a medieval kitchen or jewelry box, they slapped on his leg. Did it work? Of course not. One poor doctor even tried to burn the wound shut. That didn't end well. Henry screamed, the doctor ran, and nobody talked about it again. Because of the pain, Henry couldn't move much. He barely left his bed. When he did, he had to be carried or placed into a special wheeled chair. Getting onto a horse? Forget it. They used a mechanical lift, like a wooden crane. Watching the king being hoisted into place wasn't exactly majestic, more like moving furniture. But it wasn't just the pain. It was the anger it caused. Every time the leg flared up, his mood snapped like a twig. If you were a servant and you brought the wrong wine, yelled at. If you were a noble and you dared question anything, banished. If you were a doctor and your potion didn't work fast enough, fired. Or worse, even his closest men started avoiding his chamber. Some pretended to be sick themselves just to get out of leg duty. Palace life had changed. There were no grand feasts, no music, just the shuffle of nervous footsteps, the rustle of bandages, and the moaning of a king slowly falling apart. And yet, Henry still saw himself as powerful, as king, as chosen by God. He wore fine clothes, gold rings, and sat on his throne like nothing was wrong. But everyone else could see it. The once mighty Lion of England was rotting, one slow, painful inch at a time. And while the leg was bad, what came next would be even worse. By now, Henry VIII was more ghost than man. He barely moved. His leg was still leaking. His mind, tired, paranoid, and full of whispers. And when kings get paranoid, things get scary. Henry knew he didn't have much time left, so he locked himself away and started working on the one thing that mattered most now, his will. But here's the thing, this wasn't some peaceful goodbye letter. This was a war plan, a list of who gets what, who gets punished, and who shouldn't be trusted once he's gone. He didn't even write it all at once. He kept changing it over and over, Add this name, scratch out that one. Put this guy in charge. Wait, no, he might betray me. Remove him. One of his top men, Thomas Wriothesley. Yeah, good luck saying that name right. Was trusted with guarding the will. But even he looked nervous every time Henry called. He probably wondered if he'd survive long enough to deliver the document. Nobody knew what the final version really said. Some people believed Henry left secret orders like, if I die, get rid of that guy, or keep this person far away from my son. That kind of stuff. He feared rebellion. He feared betrayal. He even feared that his son, Prince Edward, would be used like a puppet by power-hungry lords. So he planned and planned and panicked. At night, his room was quiet, except for the scratching of a quill, the shuffle of papers, and the occasional groan from the ulcer that never let him sleep. His food tasted bland, his drinks were cold, and his thoughts full of doubt. Even his wife, Catherine Parr, wasn't told everything. She was smart. She didn't ask too many questions, just smiled, nodded, and prayed she wasn't on the bad list. Servants whispered that Henry would sometimes talk to himself, not in a gentle way, more like arguing, as if he was still fighting old enemies in his own head. That's how far it had gone. The King of England, once the most feared man in Europe, now stuck in bed, arguing with ghosts and rewriting his will like it was a game of chess. Every piece mattered. Every move had to be perfect. Because once he died, the real game would begin. And what he didn't know, no matter how carefully you plan, death doesn't follow instructions. January 28th, 1547. After weeks of silence, moaning, and the constant smell of rot, Henry VIII finally died. No grand speech, no royal farewell, just a few quiet gasps, and then nothing. The king was gone, but here's where it gets weirder and darker. His courtiers didn't announce his death right away. They kept it secret for days. Why? Because they were scared. Scared that enemies would strike, that the people would panic, that everything Henry had built or destroyed would come crashing down. So they left his body in bed, dressed him nicely, and pretended nothing had happened. Yeah, let that sink in. When they finally started moving him, things got worse. His body had already started to swell. The leg ulcer, the infection, everything inside him was turning him into a ticking time bomb. And there's an old story. Nobody can say for sure if it's true, but it's said that while his coffin was being moved, it cracked open, and some of his fluids leaked out onto the floor of the church. Then, dogs came, stray dogs, and they licked the king's blood. Creepy, right? Even creepier. There was a prophecy made years earlier that said dogs will lick his blood, like Ahab. That was a biblical king who died badly, and dogs licked his blood too. Coincidence? Maybe, but spooky. Definitely. Meanwhile, in the palace, everyone was acting calm, but panicking inside. People were burning letters, hiding documents, switching sides, all before the news even became public. And Prince Edward, Henry's only son, was just 9 years old, a child king, which meant one thing: power struggle. The old king was gone, but his shadow was still there, heavy, dark, unfinished. Even after his death, no one spoke his name too loudly. His wives were still remembered. His victims still whispered in people's minds. His ghost, real or not, still haunted the halls of his palaces. Some said they saw him in mirrors. Others claimed they heard his footsteps late at night. Maybe it was just fear, maybe some men are too cruel to rest peacefully. And that was how the mighty Henry VIII left the world, not with a crown on his head, but with dogs at his feet, secrets in his coffin, and a kingdom holding its breath. So next time you hear his name, remember, the king is dead, but his legend still limps through history.